Let me introduce you to the father of public relations, Mr. Edward Bernays. Bernays played a significant role in shaping the minds of Americans during the 20th century. When I say shaping the minds, I mean that in the sense of control, like mind control. Bernays had a gift, or better put, the ability to con people. Some would call it the gift of gab. I simply would call him a con artist, of the elite persuasion, most certainly the definition thereof. Mr. Bernays, born in 1891 and died in 1995, was an American-Austrian pioneer in public relations and propaganda. Life magazine named him one of the most, quote, 100 most influential Americans of the 20th century, close quote. According to Wikipedia, quote, his best-known campaigns include a 1929 effort to promote female smoking by branding cigarettes as feminist, quote, torches of freedom, close quote, and his work for the United Fruit Company connected with the CIA orchestrated overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan government in 1954, close quote. Interestingly, but not surprising, Bernays was a nephew of psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud via his father's sister, Martha Bernays Freud. Did you know that Bernays' wife, Doris Fleshman, was the first married woman to be issued a U.S. passport not using her married name? Wikipedia goes on to say, quote, he created the Medical Review of Reviews Sociological Fund Committee and successfully solicited the support of such elite figures such as John D. Rockefeller Jr., Franklin D. Roosevelt and Eleanor Roosevelt, Reverend John Haynes Holmes, and Anne Harriman Sands Rutherford Vanderbilt, wife of William Kissam Vanderbilt. Close quote. With the elite names that he is rubbing elbows with, it is not surprising that he becomes the father of public relations. Just saying. Bernays, who pursued his calling in New York City from 1919 to 1963, styled himself a, quote, public relations counsel, close quote. He referred to this work as, quote, psychological warfare, close quote. What a fitting description of what he was doing. He also became a co-editor of a medical review and the Hygienic Gazette in 1912 and was involved in a very controversial play in which he called it a propaganda play that fought for sex education. According to Scott Cutlip, quote, Bernays liked to think of himself as a kind of psychoanalyst to a troubled corporations. Close quote. In addition to publicizing Freud's ideas, Bernays used his association with Freud to establish his own reputation as a thinker and a theorist. In 1934, in order to make the Lucky Strikes cigarettes more appealable to women, Bernays threw what is now known as the Green Ball. It was a social event at the Waldorf Astoria, hosted by Narcissa Cox Vanderlip. The pretext for the ball and its unnamed underwriter was that proceeds would go to charity. Famous society women would attend wearing green dresses. Manufacturers and retailers of clothing and accessories were advised of the excitement growing around the color green. Intellectuals were enlisted to give highbrow talks on the theme of green. Before the ball had actually taken place, newspapers and magazines, encouraged in various ways by Bernays' office, had latched on to the idea that green was all the rage. Bernays worked hand in hand with the elite to control our minds, the minds of the masses. He was very arrogant about how he could achieve this. Just reading his quotes tell me exactly what his position was about. As usual for the elite, they really enjoy putting what they do in plain sight. Bernays was no different. He had a vision in which individual energies could be harnessed and channeled by a corporate elite for economic benefit, producing a utopian society, at least in his mind. What does that sound like? Yes. All the secret societies I have read about, like the Freemasons, their visions are all the same. Famous Bernays quotes are, quote, "If you can influence the leaders, either with or without their conscious cooperation, you automatically influence the group which they sway," close quote. Quote, "If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it." Intelligent men must realize that propaganda is the modern instrument by which they can fight for productive ends and help to bring order out of chaos. Close quote. Quote, "There are invisible rulers who control the destinies of millions. It is not generally realized to what extent the words and actions of our most influential public men are dictated by shrewd persons operating behind the scenes, nor, what is still more important, the extent to which our thoughts and habits are modified by authorities." Close quote. Quote, "The systematic study of mass psychology revealed to students the potentialities of indivisible government of society by manipulation of the motives which actuate man in the group." Close quote. Quote, "In the ethical sense, propaganda bears the same relation to education as to business or politics. It may be abused. It may be used to advertise an institution and to create in the public mind artificial values. There can be no absolute guarantee against its misuse." Close quote. Quote, "The media through which a political campaign may be brought home to the public are numerous and fairly well defined. Events and activities must be created in order to put ideas into circulation in these channels, which are varied as the means of human communication. Every object which presents pictures or words that the public can see, everything that presents intelligible sounds, can be utilized in one way or another." Close quote. Quote, "The Public Relations Council is necessary to social work, and since social service, by its very nature, can continue only by means of the voluntary support of the wealthy, it is obliged to use propaganda continually. The leaders in social service were among the first consciously to utilize propaganda in its modern sense." Close quote. I highly recommend the full reading of his book because these are just a few quotes, but I think you have the gist of what he is saying. Propaganda is mind control. Let us pause for a moment and consider how many ways we are affected by this form of mind control daily. So we have kind of seen how the medical industry is involved in mind control. We are seeing how the media propaganda is mind control. I hope you'll join us for part 3, which we'll be covering Allen Dulles, who was the first CIA director in 1953, who helped start some of the mind control. When you start looking at all the different factions of which we as Americans have been bombarded with mind control, it is astounding. And I think we are just starting to scratch the surface, honestly. So I hope you'll join us for the next part in this series.